global investigations team, talks about the blockchain as a crime scene. We've never had a crime scene before where you could look back years at transactions because they're there forever. So that really allows us to do financial crime investigations better than we've ever done them before, because we can track and trace the flow of funds in order then to work to seize them back.
Web3 attacks are rising, but Go+, the leading Web3 security layer, is fighting back. A new CoinDesk research report details how Go+ protects billions in assets as the decentralized security layer for over 40 blockchains. Discover the real-time infrastructure powering the GPS token and the Go+ app at coindesk.com/research. Hey everyone, you're watching CoinDesk. I'm Jen Sanasie. 2025 has been a year of maturity for the crypto industry, but as the tech gets smarter, so do the bad actors. From high-stakes exploits to evolving recovery tactics, the battle for on-chain security has never been greater. Joining us now to break down the year that was and what's on the horizon for 2026 is Ari Redbord, Global Head of Policy at TRM Labs. Hey, Ari.
Jen, thank you so much for having me. I love joining the show, and what a remarkable moment to be talking about this extraordinary industry as we grow in really every way: policy, institutional adoption, and really all else. So thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for coming on. We always love having you on the show. And it's exactly what you said. What a remarkable moment to be working in this industry. Things are really moving forward at a pace that we haven't seen before. Let's level set here. Let's lay a little bit of a foundation. Talk to me about the numbers. How did 2025 compare to the years before it when it comes to hacks, scams, and security?
Yeah, no, absolutely great question. And look, I think that the reality is, and I always want to start this way, as the ecosystem grows, right, we're going to see more and more illicit actors gravitate towards it because they go to where the money is. That's just the nature of bad actors and illicit activity. So we have seen a big year for scam activity. TRM has reported that we've seen about 53 billion in scams and fraud since 2023. So in about a 2.5 year span or so, actually more closer to 3 years now, I guess. And that's become a real epidemic. And we're seeing, I think, the government finally respond to this as the crisis from a national security perspective that it is. And we can get to that in a moment. We've seen about 2.8 billion in hacks this year. Over half of that is attributable to North Korea. Always really important when you're talking about hacks and North Korea this year to mention that in February, we saw a $1.5 billion hack of the Bybit exchange, which accounts for a huge percentage of that overall number and the North Korea number. We've seen a proliferation of these wrench attacks where you're seeing violent crime, robberies, and assault associated with cryptocurrency or trying to steal cryptocurrency keys or access different exchange accounts. So we're seeing a proliferation of illicit activity, but the reality is it's still a very, very small amount of overall activity in the ecosystem, especially as it continues to grow.
How is government responding?
Well, I'd say that to me is one of the huge stories of 2025. You know, obviously we have the regulatory piece, where you have the SEC and the CFTC and all the activity. You have what's happening on the Hill with Genius and market structure. But I think it's really great and encouraging to see U.S. Treasury Department and the Department of Justice really target illicit actors within the crypto ecosystem. And a great example of that is in the scams space. Just in the last few months, we saw a major action against Prince Group, which is a Cambodian-based group that was running scam compounds with leadership that went to the highest levels of the Cambodian government. So we saw this really whole of government approach where we saw the Department of Justice lead with an indictment. We saw the U.S. Treasury Department levy sanctions. We saw partners in the UK do travel bans against the leadership of Prince Group. Most amazingly or impressively, we saw a $15 billion forfeiture action against funds that were associated with scams and fraud. That forfeiture action is the largest in U.S. history, maybe world history, probably by a magnitude of 4 or 5. So what we're seeing now is scams not just treated as a law enforcement priority, where you're just tracing out a victim's loss of funds, but as a national security priority, where you're seeing us leverage the full suite of authorities that we have: sanctions, indictments, travel bans, etc. And to put a point on that, a couple of weeks after that action, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Treasury Department, the FBI announced a scam center strike force fully focused on the infrastructure the money laundering networks and the bad actors that are running these types of compounds, in many cases where the scammers themselves are human trafficking victims. I would say that, like, while we've seen illicit actors try to take advantage of transformative technology, we're also really seeing governments now lean in using tools like TRM, using public-private partnerships, sharing information to go after these networks and really take down the infrastructure.
Now, this next question I think is important for folks to understand the story. I know CoinDesk's audience is a little bit more advanced when it comes to their knowledge, but we have a lot of new folks in the space who are trying to make sense of this. And so talk to us a little bit about crypto and blockchain itself. Does it make it easier or harder to identify bad actors and catch them?
Absolutely. What's so extraordinary, I was a prosecutor for about 11 years, and I spent a lot of time in investigating cases involving bulk cash smuggling and networks of hawalas and shell companies and high value art and diamonds and real estate. There was no TRM to track and trace those things. And the reality is that in cryptocurrency, which lives and moves on blockchains, which are networks of computers that create open public ledgers, every transaction is traceable, trackable, and immutable, meaning it's there forever. My colleague Christian Chesky, who was a extraordinary cryptocurrency investigator at IRS Criminal Investigations and now leads TRM's global investigations team, talks about the blockchain as a crime scene. We've never had a crime scene before where you could look back years at transactions because they're there forever. So that really allows us to do financial crime investigations better than we've ever done them before, because we can track and trace the flow of funds in order then to work to seize them back. We can also do compliance better when you talk about cryptocurrency exchanges that are now able to see every transaction, are able to identify bad actors. The technology itself is extraordinary. And one of the reasons I often talk about we shouldn't over-regulate the space or over-focus on Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering, because the reality is we can leverage transformative technology like blockchain intelligence, like zero-knowledge proofs, like AI, to do this better in terms of investigations and compliance than we ever did before.
Web3 attacks are rising, but GoPlus, the leading Web3 security layer, is fighting back. A new CoinDesk research report details how GoPlus protects billions in assets as the decentralized security layer for over 40 blockchains. Discover the real-time infrastructure powering the GPS token and the GoPlus app at coindesk.com/research. And are you finding policymakers and regulators actually understand how the tech works?
I think so. And I think we're getting there. And I spend a lot of time really on that. And that is, I'm happy to always propose suggestions and even language. But where I think, we can be even more helpful is let us just show you what is possible today. Let us show you how we can trace and track every transaction on an immutable public ledger. Let me show you what are the capabilities when it comes to decentralized finance. We're talking about these things and we're talking about them or headlines around scams or terror financing or something. But the reality is it's like, let us show you how this technology works. And I think more and more members on both sides of the aisle are very open to that. I've been really blown away by the level of engagement from regulators and policymakers on Capitol Hill, just sending an email and saying, hey, come in and talk to us. Show us a demo of TRM. Have a conversation. We want to understand how this technology works. And I'm not talking about staff. I'm talking about members of Congress. I'm talking about senior leaders at agencies. I think that's a huge sea change. And definitely something like, for me, will be a huge takeaway of just having that experience, being able to have those types of conversations in 2025.
One of the big themes this year, you mentioned it, was evolving recovery tactics. Are you able to give us a percentage or a number? How many funds that were stolen were actually able to be recovered this year?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we have seen billions, tens of billions in seizures over the last few years. I mentioned the Prince Group case, which was this $15 billion forfeiture action. That is an only in crypto kind of story. The largest ever seizure in US history was in the Bitfinex hack, which famously like the biggest heist ever, right? Those are the biggest in history because it's only in crypto, where you can track and trace those funds, where you can go back in time, where you can actually work to seize them. So I think that the reality is that we're having a lot of success here. About a year and a half or so ago, we stood up with Tether and Tron, the T3 financial crime unit, to trace illicit proceeds in Tether on Tron and ultimately seize them back. We have seized well over 300 million today from that initiative in just the 18 months that it's been operational, or slightly less than that. So there are huge successes here. Look, the reality is that crypto is a paradox. Like now bad actors can move larger amounts of funds faster than ever before. And that makes this technology very attractive. But we also have the technology to chase them down in ways we never could before. And we're seeing law enforcement do that more and more. I would still say that there are very few globally investigators with the tools, with the training to be able to do that. And we need to grow that as fast as bad actors are growing their capability to move faster.
Everything is moving at an insane pace, including AI. What happens when we introduce AI into the mix?
There are tremendous challenges. And the way I think about AI, I testified before the House Judiciary on the first ever hearing on AI crime over the summer. And I feel like I think about AI two ways. One is how are bad actors leveraging it? And we're seeing bad actors leverage it at scale. We've seen about a 500% increase in AI-enabled scams in the last year. That is very scary. We've seen ransomware actors be able to spin up ransomware affiliates, right? These sort of franchises that go out there and deploy malware at the click of a button. AI supercharges criminal activity. Bad actors can now move faster than ever before programmatically laundering funds. And this is going to continue because, again, bad actors are always early adopters of transformative technology. Think end-to-end message, encrypted messaging app, think crypto, now AI. But the other way we think about this is how can we at TRM work with law enforcement and national security agencies to also move faster? That's why we created the Beacon Network over the summer. Beacon now accounts for about 80% of all centralized crypto transaction volume. So think Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, OKX, Crypto.com, Blockchain.com, Robinhood, Stripe, PayPal. And we've married them with global law enforcement agencies that are flagging alerts in real time and ultimately being able to block and seize the funds. We need to move faster. You mentioned speed at the beginning. This is why I run all the time, right? Like we need to run faster than these adversaries who are also leveraging the technology. If you sort of ask me, what do I think about really all the time these days? It's how are bad guys leveraging AI and how can we leverage that technology at TRM at every layer of our platform to run as fast as they're running right now. Beacon is a great example of that today.
And Ari, lastly, I want to touch on the Safe Crypto Act. That was something that was introduced this month. Talk to me a little bit about what we're seeing there and how significant this intergovernmental task force could be should it come to fruition.
No, it's a great question. And I think a really important bill, really supportive of the work that's being done by Senator Moran and others. This is all about partnership. I hate the term public-private partnership because I feel like it's everyone's answer to like a recommendation when they don't have another recommendation. I like to think about this as public-private disruption. We need to build connectivity between law enforcement and the private sector. We need to share data, but we need to actually interdict funds and seize them back in real time. And I think that the SAFE Act is a great starting point to a conversation about how do we come together, public and private sector, to stop funds. And that is what we're doing at Beacon today. And I think that's what ultimately the SAFE Act does. So I think of it as an extraordinary start to a conversation on what does comprehensive legislation look like to stop all of this scam activity. And we're not going to trace our way out of this from a crypto perspective, right? We need to have technology is a huge part of it, but we also need to use every law enforcement tool, every national security authority. And that's why I think what the SAFE Act does is bringing all of those groups together, right? Treasury, DOJ, blockchain intelligence providers, cryptocurrency businesses, prosecutors, law enforcement to come together and stop this. Partnership is the only way, and public-private partnership is absolutely the critical piece to this.
There's so much happening in this industry all the time, all at once. Ari, it's such a pleasure to have you on to really understand the hacks, scams, and security part because it is developing at an insane pace. I got to ask you, if 2025 was about maturity and clarity, what do you think the word is going to be that defines 2026?
It's execution. I think that what we've talked about for so long is like, how do we build the frameworks? What does policy making look like? We need legal clarity. I think it's all here or coming very soon. And now it's like, all right, let's really lean in here. Let the technology fade away and let's just start using these extraordinary tools. And I think we're seeing that, right? You've seen this extraordinary announcement today, DTCC and Canton Network. Yesterday, we saw amazing headlines from JP Morgan and Visa. So to me, it's hey, taking like getting out of the sandbox, right? That we've been in for so long in experimentation, and let's start with execution. So we're executing all day, every day in 2026.
Ari, thanks so much for joining us. Hope you have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2026.
Happy New Year, Jen. So much fun and looking forward to 2026.